Redditors, what was your holy crap I'm going to die moment? So, I had an ex-friend of mine point a .22 caliber rifle at my face. Growing up around firearms all my life, I understand that a .22 will still kill a person, and to top it off, it was pointed at my face, which is a big no-no. He started saying how it was unloaded, blah 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 blah, and I immediately thought, this piece of crap is gonna shoot me in the head with a .22. And he brought it up to his shoulder and said, "See?" And I ducked out of the way and he put a bullet into the drywall behind me. If I would have been a second too late, I would have been hit. I pulled the rifle from out of his hands, hit him in the stomach with the butt of the rifle, and started screaming. I was pissed. You always check the effing chamber, a-hole. Also, never point a firearm at something you are not willing to kill and or destroy. Next story. I recently went bungee jumping for the first time. The guy gave me a 5-second countdown, and right as I jumped, he yelled, wait, as if I wasn't strapped in properly. I didn't scream or anything, I just remember thinking, well, nothing to do now. When I bounced back up, that a-hole was doubled over laughing. I did manage to give him the finger while I was still midair though. Next story. I technically have died. When I was first learning to ride a bike, I fell off and hit my head on the curb. Got up and was fine. Everyone said I looked okay and was perfectly responsive. 2 or 3 hours later, back at home, I collapsed on the floor and started to sit in front of my whole family. Ended up vomiting in my mouth and inhaling it, giving me pneumonia. At this point, I passed out. During surgery, they find out that I had a swell inside my skull that was pressuring my brain. During the surgery to alleviate this swelling, my heart stopped beating and I had zero brain activity. For all intents and purposes, dead. I then recovered in bed, woke up by myself, pulled the oxygen tube that had been keeping me alive for the whole night, and I cried until someone came. Then I asked for ice cream and to see my family, all of whom had slept in the hospital. Next story. Driving down the freeway at about 80 miles per hour, that's 130 kilometers per hour in commie units, and Sledgehammer fell off the back of a truck 2 lanes over, bounced off the ground, and headed straight for my windshield. And that whole everything was in slow motion thing is true. I watched each revolution of the hammer in perfect detail and remember thinking, whoa, that's a damn sledgehammer. Man, that thing is headed right for me. Like, right for me. I think at its current trajectory, it's probably going to hit me in the face. That would suck. Check mirror, swerve, hammer bounces harmlessly onto the shoulder. I had to get over into the slow lane and catch my breath for a few miles. Crap was intense. Next story. I was 16 and working in a wood processing company over the summertime. The usual staff was on vacation, but the production halls were full of extern workers installing a new machine and rearranging the old ones for the new one to fit. I was among them. One day, we faced some cables, about 1.5 centimeter radius each, crossing a wall which we needed to get out of there somehow, so they handed me a gouge and told me to get rid of the cement so we could pull out the cables. I started, and at first it was going well, but then I faced a resistance. I went on more carefully, but it dawned on me I had hit a cable. I asked the head worker how to proceed, and he was just like, "Go on, there's no power circulating at the moment, and even if you break it, nobody will need that anymore." So back to violence mode, I started hitting the gouge harder, again. But it turned out it really was a cable, and the head worker lied. Suddenly, my body got numb, started shaking uncontrollably, and I couldn't release the gouge between me and the now open cable. Luckily, one of the other workers saw me struggling and got me away from that death trap somehow. Next thing I remember is me lying on the ground, surrounded by some other workers, amongst them the apologizing head worker, and feeling a bit numb in all body parts, especially in the arm that holds the gouge. Until today, I don't know how close that was, if it even was close, but in the moment, stuck on the gouge, flooded by high voltage, I panicked that it was over. Edit. Thanks guys, I'm fine. After the incident, it happened shortly before lunch, so they sent me home but promised me full pay for the day. The stupid teenage badass I was didn't go to the hospital, felt completely fine the day after and went back to work. Lucky me. I didn't sue anyone also, and I didn't do anything else to the head worker. Probably should have gone for a lawsuit, but until years later, I never even thought of it. There was an electrician present, but he was occupied elsewhere in the building. After it happened, he checked the gouge still stuck in the cable and told us something along the lines of, "Yep, there's definitely voltage." I didn't know and still don't know the purpose of the cables. I just remember they came from a room full of similar looking cables which were connected to some kind of box on the wall. Conceivably a transformer? I was wearing shoes with rubber soles. Maybe those did their part in saving me? Who knows? Next story. My first panic attack was awful. I had somehow managed to get a panic attack half sleep and had hyperventilated to the point where there was too much carbon dioxide in my brain and I started hallucinating like hell. At the point where I woke up, I saw my hand without its skin. I just saw all of my tendons and crap when I tried to understand what was going on and somehow managed to call 112, which is Finland's version of 911, during the hallucination. The dude on the phone told me to stay chill and wait for an ambulance since my whole left hand was already numb and crap was going real tight with my heart. Told me to call again if I got worse. And it did get worse. Can't really describe how it felt, but I felt like I was watching myself from above, and I felt like I wasn't on this earth, and that everyone in life was a lie, like the Matrix or some crap. I called them again, telling them I'm feeling super weird, I don't know what's going on, so they tell me to go outside to wait for the ambulance. So I did go outside, but at that point, I had already lost it quite nicely, so I was sitting behind a tree lurking whatever the F was going on in this world when I saw the ambulance. When I saw the ambulance and somehow understood that it's different than the other cars, I was 100% sure that if you've lost it mentally and gone nuts, there's no one to help you. I was 1,000,000% sure you can only fix like bone fractures and crap, that I was a complete lost cause. So I had this huge paranoia crap going on as I was sitting behind the tree watching the ambulance dude struggling to get inside the apartment building that I lived in. When they eventually did get in, I tried to sneak in with them in my hallucinogenic state. We were all waiting, 3 of us, for the elevator to come, and when it finally came and we were all 3 inside the elevator, I managed to tell them that you guys are hopefully looking for me. And they were like, what? And yeah, they're looking for me. So we go back down the elevator and they take me to the hospital to give me something that settles me down. Spent the night in there, I was juiced up, slept like a baby. After I woke up, I had that same weird out-of-body feeling for months and months on. I couldn't look myself in the mirror for months, or I felt like I would snap back to that hallucinogenic state because I felt like this wasn't the real world or some crap. Same problem with people closing eyes. I guess it was a trauma caused by the fact that when I woke up I was in the mad trip, but felt like the Matrix crap just kept going on. After the first panic attack, I could not sleep without meds for about 1.5 years. To this day, I have to sleep with some background noise, preferably human speech, usually nature documentaries or something, and I've got to have the lights on. And it's been about 3 years and suffered from some heavy panic attacks after that, and I get them regularly still. Next story. When I went parasailing in Bali, Indonesia. It was my first time. The guy responsible for fastening the vest is connected to the parachute. He didn't tie the ropes very well, but little did I know. The way it works is that the boat that sails around while I'm in the air would accelerate. Then I start running around until the parachute opens and I start floating in the air. What happened is, as I was running, I fell down and drank half of the ocean's water. But I did go up, about 30 meters or so above water. I looked to my side and thought, wow, that's beautiful. I looked in front of me and saw the vest that should have been tying me to the parachute hanging there, and I was not in it. It must have slipped off of me while I was underwater, so there I was hanging in the air with only my hands holding tight to some ropes to keep me from falling, and the dude sailing the boat didn't even notice that I was hanging with only my arms and kept sailing. I started screaming my lungs out, but the dude couldn't hear me. Finally, some guys down saw me and alerted the boat driver, and he slowed down as I slowly descended to the water. Next story. Complications during my C-section. My partner at the time was awful to me and decided during my C-section was the best time to be himself. When they started the operation, he leaned in my ear and whispered, "Don't worry about being fat after this. They have all your fat and guts on the tables by you." At which time a nurse overheard and escorted him out of the room. At that point, things became confusing and my body was jolted around a lot. Think of someone emptying your stomach, then packing it back in as hard as they can. Even in my drugged state, I knew something was off and I just felt like I was slipping away. Then someone started petting my hair while asking me questions, and I just felt like everything would be better if I keep going away and I stopped answering questions. I remember hearing someone telling me to just hold on, and then everything went black. When I gained consciousness, I was in the ICU, and they went over how I blacked out and got a transfusion from all of my blood loss, and I'm like 90% sure I was dying. Next story. Emergency landing in Phoenix without telling anyone in the cabin that we were performing an emergency landing. Just saw and felt the plane go 90 degrees on its side and bank like crazy, then sharp dive from 30,000 feet to like 500 feet, and then bank at 90 degrees again just a few hundred feet above ground for a good 3 minutes to emergency land with over 50 fire trucks and ambulances waiting for our arrival on the tarmac. And never once did the pilot say a damn word or any of the stewardesses. Just before, the stewardess ran around like crazy and one was crying. Then the plane just moseyed on over to a gate and they wouldn't let us leave until some emergency electrician crew came to the back of the plane and ripped out a bunch of panels and circuitry. Finally, we left and they still never told us anything. One woman had a heart attack or something. We got a free hotel night and no explanation. That's why I am never flying Delta ever again. Edit. And yes, if you were wondering, I did in fact believe with all of my heart we were crashing. Mainly because people started freaking out and my wife and I looked out the window which was pointed at the effing ground. Like, not at an angle, but like full on its side just a few hundred feet above ground when we still had a ways to go. And I was thinking, there's no reason to be this low. And our effing side corkscrewing down into Arizona, so I guess we're crashing. My Catholic side got the best of me and mouthed a Hail Mary. Didn't help either that the pilot kept jerking the wing tilt so erratically to correct it, so I was thinking something was forcing us to be on our side. Turns out you can really maneuver those big commercial airliners like a fighter jet almost, so no big deal. This was way back in 2012. Next story. Watching a dump truck barreling towards me in my rear view mirror. Traffic had stopped and he didn't. I heard the brakes screeching, looked in the mirror, and just braced myself. He swerved into the grass divider but still clipped my bumper and took it off with his tire. Then he denied he even hit me. I just remember thinking, oh my god, and thinking the bumper getting torn off was the back seat getting crumpled in. Took me a minute to even process that I was okay, and so was the car. Then postscript, because people actually asked, unfortunately, I was a pretty broke student at the time and I had a crap car. It was either pay the rent or the insurance that month, so yeah, no insurance. Anyway, the cop said he couldn't be sure the truck had hit me. What? And then gave me a ticket. I was just glad to be alive and still have a drivable car, plus I was in a bit of shock, so I never made a fuss about it. Just drove around without a bumper for a while. Next story. So this reminds me of a similar story I had. I was on the highway one time, or like an off-ramp of the highway. I don't know, the sort of kind of highway, that's what we'll call it. And there was this turn I needed to make. I needed to make a right turn, and this truck comes around the bend. It's like not a semi-truck, but like a delivery truck, essentially like that, a bit bigger. But anyway, he comes around the bend and sees the cars all the way backed up, and I'm the last car, so he brakes it, and he didn't crash or anything, but like, if this guy was stupid or had a worse reaction time, I would have been smushed. Thankfully, there wasn't really anybody in the left lane because everybody needed to turn right apparently, so thank goodness for that, but yeah, your narrator almost got squashed. Anyway, next story. So, I was 17. I used to love to ride my bicycle. At one particular time, I went up a huge hill that had a lot of curves as roads uphill usually do, so went up, no problem. The problem, though, was going down. A car was going up, and the moments before we crashed, I was thinking, well, this is it. Got away with a few scratches. Rode home and didn't tell anyone about it. I was really, really lucky that day. Next story. Was very young, 3 or 4. It's one of my first memories. I was playing in the ocean, only a couple of inches of water, got knocked over by a wave and dragged around a bit. No matter what, it felt like I just couldn't stand up. I just kept getting knocked over. In my tiny toddler mind, I remember thinking, this is the end, I give up, and I decided to stop fighting. In reality, I was just laying face down in the sand. The lifeguard had to come and pick me up. Next story. I've had a crappy drinking problem most of my life now. One time, I drank way too much hard liquor with my friend. I started getting the spins, so I went and sat in the shower. My friend also was very drunk, so he ended up going to bed. I got out of the shower, puked in the toilet, and laid down on my back staring at the ceiling with insane vertigo. I remember feeling like I was forcing myself to breathe because I felt like my body wasn't going to keep doing it for me. When I woke up the next day, I thought how effing dumb I was. Not only drinking an insane amount, but laying on my back? I could have choked if I unconsciously vomited, and just that terrible feeling of forcing yourself to breathe. Started cutting back ever since. Next story. I was a gas well tester and was in the middle of this field when I saw this enormous shelf cloud beginning to develop from the west. This thing looked like it came from hell. It was green and black and it was crazy. I've never seen a storm cloud like it. From the north, there was also a storm cloud coming. I decided I would try and test this one last well before getting back to town. I got paid per well, trail, so there was an incentive. Well, this was on a trail about 4 kilometers in this farmer's field. I tested the well, but on the way back, the storm hit. Right in front of me, as I got onto the gravel road, I saw a huge funnel cloud with sizable objects being tossed around. My truck was rocking back and forth like it was a ride at an amusement park. I raced back down the road away from it, but the hail and rain were so horrendous, I couldn't see. I parked, phoned my family to tell them I loved them, and I held on. It was insane. The tornado destroyed a barn and threw around some equipment, but nobody got hurt. I still wonder how I got out of that. Next story. Cousin's friend showed us how to ride our bikes down a staircase. I wasn't wearing a helmet and went down halfway before the back of the back bounced higher than the front and caused me to both lose balance and slide off the seat and crash down the remaining steps with the bike hitting me every step of the way. There was so much blood on and around me. Surprisingly, besides a few big cuts and bruises, I was fine. No broken bones or chipped teeth. Bike was okay, but my uncle had to change the tubes inside the back tire. Next story. So, I don't quite remember where it was, but there was this beautiful waterfall and rapid river my family and I visited when I was 11. So, as I was taking in the scene around me, my brother tells me to check and see how cold the water is. I didn't think anything of it, so I went onto a near rock, and as I took a step onto it, I slipped, busted my ass, and I fell in. So I am holding on to dear life as the rapids and waves crash against my face, thinking, well, this is how my stupid idiot self dies. But the current was brutally fast and the river was incredibly deep, but my father came in and saved me. That was a fun trip because a day before that I crapped my pants in front of a lot of people. Next story. My mom was slowing the car down before pulling into our driveway, and she asked me to check the mail before going inside. I thought she was going to slow down to let me out at the street, so I went ahead and opened my door. I didn't realize she was slowing down to turn into our driveway. She turned left into the driveway when I had opened the door. I was forced almost completely out of the car. I kept my hand on the handle of the door, and the seatbelt kept me from falling all the way out, but my face was probably 2 inches from concrete. I was able to pull myself up using the one hand on the door handle and the tension on the seatbelt. I literally thought I was going to die. Next story. Being diagnosed with a rare chronic illness, then making the mistake of doing my own research online before seeing a doctor for the treatment protocol and individual prognosis. I read all of this stuff that was overwhelming and scary, but since all I had was a biopsy pathology report to go off of, I really didn't have any specific information pertaining to my own individual case. It led me to thoughts of, I'm going to die, nothing can be done. Seeing the doctor for the first time didn't help much, as he was also concerned and said the situation at that point was grave and rapidly getting worse. So I flew into a panic and even had a nervous breakdown after that. And this was in December of 2011, and the 4-year mark for the diagnosis passed on November 7th of this year. I've gotten my illness under control, obviously haven't died, and in some areas have improved beyond just stabilizing. The first few months were rough, but things have seemingly worked out better. Never do your own research. For medical stuff, it has the possibility to drive you crazy. Next story. After delivering my 10.5-pound son, I had these terrible stomach cramps. I couldn't figure out why I was hurting so much. Still, this was my 3rd child. Nurses didn't seem bothered by it, and my friend and husband both left me alone in the room. Next thing I know, I can feel blood dripping and spilling all the way down to my feet. I was still laying down. My husband came in to find me covered in blood, and the nurses began scooping out blood clots like they were getting the seeds out of a pumpkin. My baby tried to kill me. Next story. Driving onto a brand new freeway transition on a dark night. They hadn't yet put up the reflectors on the edge of the roadway, and I was going about 20 miles per hour faster than I had any right to be going. Suddenly, the road curved to the right, and I locked up the brakes for a sickening second before the car went airborne into the darkness. Someone was watching over me that night because 15 feet to the left and right, there would have been a 50-foot drop. Fortunately, I managed to miss the drop and land on a dirt area only a few feet below the roadway. It took a while for me to get breathing back to a reasonable level and to check the car for damage before getting back on the road. Next story. Not for me, but my friend. We were at Cedar Point. It's an amusement park in Ohio, and had just gotten on the power tower. We were on the side that goes up slowly. You sit at the top for an eternity, and then you just plummet. Well, on the way up, we realized my friend's harness did not lock down. It was connected only by the seatbelt. I said to him, "Nice knowing ya," on the way up, and thank effing God those did not end up being my last words to him. Next story. When I was in my early 20s, I started having trouble mixing up words. Not like one word for another, just I would think of the word but speak gibberish. So my doctor sends me in to get a CT. Went through the usual questions before you get the IV contrast. Are you allergic to iodine? No. Are you allergic to shellfish? No. Unfortunately, I found I'm not allergic to those, but I am allergic to IV contrast. I was laying in the tube and they came in to inject me and tell me I might feel some warmness and to just lay still. After about a minute, I told them to hold off on starting up the scan because I had to sneeze. And I waited and waited, no sneeze. So I tell her, go ahead with it. Whir, sneeze. I apologized for messing up the scan and realized I couldn't open my eyes. I told her I couldn't open my eyes and she came over and said, "Looks like you're having an allergic Oh, God." And at this point, I couldn't reply because my throat closed up. I heard her run across the room. Then I heard the code over the speakers. Code blue radiology is a weird thing to hear, especially when it's you. Everything started to fade out as I heard people rush into the room, and I realized there was nothing I could do to change this. This was dying. Then I felt the worst pain I've ever felt. I'm not sure why, but when the epinephrine hit me, it gave me my first migraine ever. It felt like they'd stabbed me through my left eye and pierced the back of my brain. To go from darkness to a blinding light that pulsed with the beat of my heart was its own holy crap, I'm going to die moment. Now, 12 years later, anytime my blood pressure raises, I get the same migraine in that same spot, reminding me of that moment. Next story. Fell 40 feet out of a tree. That cliche about time stopping? Well, it turns out that's a thing. I was 12. I landed in 2 feet of water and between two boulders. All this because some a-hole tied the rope swing to the top branch of the rope swing tree. Also, car accidents, getting stuck free climbing in the Rockies, getting jumped by 5 twacked out gangsters with knives, getting pulled out by a nasty undertow, meeting a mountain lion face to face. Trying to understand calculus. Next story. Lucid moment in A&E after being admitted with swollen throat due to septic tonsillitis, a complication of previously undiagnosed acute glandular fever. I overheard the doctor on the phone to an ENT consultant on the other side of the curtain say, "If he doesn't improve soon, I'm gonna have to do a tracheotomy." Then I don't remember anything until several hours later. Thankfully, IV penicillin worked and the swelling went down. Next story. I flipped inside and was thrown out of a vehicle in a tumbling car crash in the woods. I remember what the windscreen felt like as I went through it, and my brain was going 100,000 miles per hour with thoughts of this being the end of me. Thankfully, I landed on a bunch of leaves in the wooded area next to us and came out without a scratch. Next story. When I was young, my dad pulled me up on the horse he was riding. The horse was usually well-tempered, so he trusted it, but that day it spooked and took off across the field. My dad curled me into his arms as he slid to the side. He laid me onto the ground and I rolled away as he was dragged for another 100 feet when his shoe finally released from the stirrup. I remember looking up at the sky and not remembering him doing any of it. I got up and I didn't see anyone anywhere, and I was certain that I had died. Turns out the weeds were just tall enough for me not to be able to see him, but he was banged up pretty bad. Dislocated shoulder and a broken wrist. I just had a few bruises. I asked him if we died and if we were in heaven. Then I asked him to hug me. He told me he couldn't move and that I had to be patient. Then I saw my mom and ran to her for the hug. It was a pretty confusing time. Next story. I was about 6, and at that point, I did not know how to swim. Both my parents were talking, and they told me to stay in the shallow area of the pool. Being the smart kid I was pushing the limited going back and forth, but every time I would go closer to the edge, well, apparently, I did not know where the edge was because I fell right in and sunk to the bottom. I remember I was down there for probably only 10 seconds, but I just remember lying down under the water, looking at the light shining through the pool and my parents talking, then I see my dad dive in and save me. Next story. So, my Chicago-born friend and I are driving across country one fine winter's day. It's been snowing, but nothing too major. The sky is gray and mushy. Still, the car is warm and the radio is loud, so I'm enjoying myself. I didn't realize, though, he was going almost 90 as we hit the bridge. Instantly, it was like driving on glass. I felt the car start to swing towards the left and immediately grabbed the Jesus Christ handle. Suddenly, the front of the car swings to the right. I wish I could scream, but I was afraid that if I tried, blood might come out, especially once the bumper gently tapped against the guardrail. After that, we were in a spin and I was staring at the road that had been behind us a moment ago. The back bumper tapped the guardrail a bit harder, keeping us in the same spin. Now, he insists that we only spun 4 or 5 times, but he's a filthy damn liar is what he is. I'm pretty sure that we spun at least 8 times, in another rapid succession, spinning like a top, bumpers constantly constantly hitting the guardrail but not losing hardly any forward momentum? If I made any sound during this time, it must have been an inaudible declaration that I was taking back anything I might have earlier thought about death or his mother. But eventually the car straightens out, well past the bridge. We're still in the right lane, we're still alive, and we're facing the right direction. And that bastard just gets us back up to speed and keeps driving like it's an everyday thing. Effing Illinois drivers. Next story. Probably the time I actually died when I thought it. I wrote this in a response in another thread a while back, but I'll repeat it here. I was killed when I was 18 years old. I have no recollection of the time I was gone or dead. No tunnel, white light, etc. Just saw the truck, an 18-wheeler coming at me. Then I was in the hospital. To this day, 20 years later, I can still summon the perfect image of a truck grill about 1 inch from my face with incredible clarity. And then tiny snippets of my friends talking, pain, lots of blood and random things, but it was like going to sleep and waking up and not remembering a dream. Seeing the truck coming at me in slow motion was the moment I said to myself, holy crap, I'm gonna die. But the longer version of the story is, fortunately it was on a B road, not the highway, so not full speed, and we were hit perpendicularly, and as I looked over my right shoulder, I saw the truck coming right at us. I watched it approach slow-mo, and the last thing I remember is seeing the truck grill about an inch or so from my face, quite literally right at the window. Then flashes of people talking, people in my face yelling, lots of blood. My front teeth were shattered. I shouldn't have watched the truck come at me, I might have saved my teeth. Apparently though, I came from tough stock, go Viking DNA, because they brought me back somehow, and I spent a few months recovering, but still have hip and knee problems and will require replacements. But I keep putting it off as I'm a firefighter and don't want that kind of downtime or PT and taking that much time off. If I become a liability, obviously, I'll have the surgery, but as long as it's just pain and not impairment, I'm going to keep running into burning buildings and being generally a stupid adrenaline junkie. But to circle back, it was a mix of exactly what you'd expect at an accident scene, which I am now very familiar with as I respond to them all the time from the other side of the fence. But what's really interesting is that while a lot of it is a mix of weird images, the time I was gone is just gone. No supernatural crap, but the memories, both like videos and pictures, are still incredibly vivid to this day, 25 years later. As I'm typing this, I'm seeing the truck grill 1 inch from my face, which also has some nice scars from the accident. I can remember every scratch, smudge, and ding on it. It's really quite odd, but also interesting. Next story. I actually have a recent story for this one. One of my more well-off friends' mother decided to make our summer after graduating high school special for us. So, me and 6 other teenagers got a full paid trip in Maui for a week over summer, and the very first thing we did there was jump off of a large cliff over the beach near the major resorts called the Black Rock. If I can find a link, I'll post it here later. But the actual jump wasn't as frightening or as life-threatening as I was expecting, but I wasn't the greatest of swimmers. Unfortunately for me, we had to swim half a mile after jumping to get back to the shore, and a whirlpool had begun to form near the wall of rocks by the cliff leading back to the end of the beach. I got fairly exhausted early in the swim, so I figured if I could get to the rocks, I could climb them and walk back to where we all planned to meet afterwards. What ended up actually happening was a feeling of being pulled into the depth of the ocean as I swam closer to the rocks, and as I sunk under, I tried to turn back and was unsuccessful. I couldn't scream for help since I couldn't pull my head up to the surface of the water, and there was nowhere immediately near me where I could grab or hold on to. After about 20 seconds into the current, I blacked out and woke up violently to the rocks near the cliff, cutting open my leg, and I was able to grab onto the ledge and free myself from the water. If I wasn't shocked awake from the pain in my leg though, I could have very well died on our vacation. Instead, I have a cool scar on my calf. Next story. I was around 11 years old when one of my friends and I decided to go and check out the half-burnt-down apartment building down from the street from where I lived. It was 7 or 8 stories, and we were just going from story to story, checking out the rubble. I started heading up to the second to last floor by myself when I yelled down to my friend, "Hey, I'm heading up to the roof." As I yelled, a man in a black trench coat came out of the hallway and grabbed me by the shirt. My friend yelled for me to run, but I looked up as the guy reached into his jacket and pulled out a semi-automatic handgun and put it into my chest. I remember looking into his dark eyes as he said, "If you're smart, you'll never come back here again." And he shoved me back down the steps, and I booked it out of there, passed my friend, and made it all the way home before I thought of anything else. I really thought I was going to die. I didn't report it to anyone because there was a park across the street from my house that had snitches get stitches spray painted on one of the walls. Next story. I was finished installing an AC unit. It started raining for the third time that day. I rushed to put the cover plate over the electrical area, and I dropped a screw inside. Well, I was rushing and not thinking and reached in to grab it. Standing in a puddle and touched the contractor with my middle finger. Got lagged on for what felt like eternity, screaming like a little girl. Finally, my boss came running and drop-kicked me. Never been so thankful for that in my life. The whole time I just thought, this is it. I'm dead. Learned respect for the electricity that day. 120 volts will take your life. Next story. Was fishing in the Delaware River in a canoe and threw the anchor right out above some rapids. However, I guess I was closer to the rapids than I thought, and once the anchor caught the bottom of the river, it caused the canoe to get turned around and begin to tip over. But my leg and foot got tangled in the anchor rope, pulling me under the water and unable to get free. I was pulled about 1 foot under the surface of the water, but was unable to break the surface to breathe. The anchor rope was now taut between the anchor and the bottom of the river and tied the canoe, with me tangled underneath the canoe on the tightening rope. Panic set in. After exhausting most of my energy to break free, I remember the panic just vanished and thinking very calmly, just basically, wow, I'm gonna die here. This is the end, or something very similar along to that. Luckily, and obviously, I ended up slipping free and half drowned. I floated down the rapids and washed up on shore on the other side. Ended up throwing up massive amounts of water when I pulled myself on shore. Next story. When I was 4, the neighbor's dog attacked me when I was returning a Sega Genesis game to a friend. This MF was huge and bit down my leg and moved it around and crap. I was far from home, and my parents were in the backyard, so they couldn't hear me. Thank God a black dog I never saw before jumped on him and kicked his ass badly. Nearly killed him. I was really effing sure I was dead, and that's important considering I was 4 and never pictured that idea before. Next story. Went to the walk-in clinic with dizziness, and the doctor noticed half my face was paralyzed with lack of feeling on the same side. He said this looks like a brain tumor. Well, he told my mother, who told me after I asked her what the doctor said when she talked to him alone before we left to the hospital. After thinking I was gonna die like a recent family member did from a brain tumor, the hospital said it was a stroke, then later changed it to multiple sclerosis. Going into the initial brain scan was definitely an oh crap, I'm gonna die from this is real moment. Next story. This was in the early 90s. I was an undercover cop working at becoming fully integrated into a gang of thugs. Our mission was to rob a bank, but things went south pretty quickly, and I ended up with a bullet in my gut. I kept saying, I'm gonna die, I just know it. I'm gonna die, Larry. Okay, so is this a movie or a television reference? Because a few times now I've read particular stories, and I'm just like, I feel like these are references to media. I caught one for the TV show The Expanse, I caught one for Home Alone, and I think there was some third one that I didn't know it was from. Is this from a movie, guys? I don't know where that line's from. But anyway, next story. So, one of the streets leading to my old house was a really steep hill. The roads had iced over one winter, so I had to make sure to use the other entrance that started at the base of the hill. One night, I spaced out and drove onto the street that led down this hill, which was about a quarter-mile long and what seemed like a 45-degree angle. I stupidly decided I would try and coast down instead of taking the time to drive around to the other entrance. As soon as I crested the hill, I tapped my brakes and immediately started sliding. My street was about 2/3 of the way down. I attempted to pump my brakes and keep myself moving slow enough to make the turn onto my street without ending up in my neighbor's kitchen. I was moving around 15 miles per hour and started to turn and gas into my street. Unfortunately, I kept moving forward as my car just turned diagonally. So now I'm approaching the base of this hill at 25 miles per hour. I can see the headlight of the cars on the main street running perpendicular to me, and I hit the base of the hill, taking out my bumper, slide sideways in between multiple cars, and ended up on the other side of the road, pointing in the right direction. I put my car back in gear and drove off as if nothing happened. Went home and changed my pants. Next story. I had one couple months back during the summer. It was about 8:30, 20:30 to me, at the time, and I was walking on my way to work. The place I worked at that time was about a block from the house. In any case, there's this light-guarded mid-block crosswalk I had to cross. So I dutifully pressed the button and waited. In maybe 2 or 3 minutes, the light changed. I looked both ways, have it, and started across the 6 lanes of traffic. I'm about 2/3 of the way across when I happened to glance to my right just in time to see this small white car. I doubt I will ever forget this, barreling right at me. He's doing an easy 60 miles per hour and maybe 24 feet in front of me. I only had enough time to pull my ass forward, but not quite clear the car. His mirror hit me in the side with a meaty and painful thwack, followed by the sound of glass breaking as the mirror sheared off. I, in turn, was spun a full 180 degrees before sitting down on my ass in the crosswalk and starting to curse. If I had only been inches back, he'd have hit me square on, while inches forward and he'd have missed me entirely. I can honestly say that my thought in that instant was, when I saw that car, well, I'm dead, followed by, this is gonna hurt, and I ended up with a massive bruise on my side, a broken rib, and missing one shoe. Apparently, and this is what the police told me, I was so incensed by the guy that as the police were handcuffing him, I pulled my shoe off while I was on the gurney and threw it at the guy, hitting him in the face and bloodying his nose. Next story. I went to Dorney Water Park a few years ago with my family just to spend time with my niece and nephew. I can't swim. My niece really wanted to go on a water slide with me, and I decided to because why not? It's just a slide. I didn't think we would land in a pool for some reason and found out once we got to the top of the steps. And for some reason, I decided to go through with it. The whole time sliding down, I was telling myself to try to float, try to breathe, relax, and I landed in the pool and nearly drowned. I couldn't find the floor of the pool with my feet, and I couldn't float in the water. I kept my arm up above the water while I was flailing around in hopes of getting a guard's attention and was thinking to myself, this is it. I'm gonna die. Someone save me. And soon after, I heard whistles blowing. Then, like a minute after, I was able to stand, looked down, and saw that the water was only up to my neck and shoulders. The guards asked if I was okay, and I was just confused out of my mind. Hilarious to think back on it. Next story. I was on a gas lantern cave tour with my family. We went down to the deepest accessible part of the cave to see some petroglyphs that had been documented and set up to be observed in their original environment. Every pair had a lantern with them, but we were ordered to keep track of the person directly in front of us and the person directly behind, and if either one went out of sight, to shout a code word to the guide so we could stop and regroup. My family was at the back of the group because we were the only ones without small children. We were making our way out of the deepest part when I look up and see the lantern of the group in front of us disappear around a corner. I shout the code word as loud as I could and, expecting it to be passed up the line, did as we were told and parked ourselves right there so the guide could double back and get us. But a couple of minutes go by, and there's no one, no other light in the cave, and the lanterns aren't coming back. I shout again and wait, still nothing. We're a half-mile underground, no other way to call for help. I get up and move my lantern around, trying to see if I can find the very narrow opening that we came in, but the nature of the lantern light just made everything look like empty shadows. I shouted again, and there was still no answer, and I felt this deep weight settle in my stomach. I'd read about people getting lost in cave systems, people wandering away from the group and following dead-end pathways deeper underground, people not being found until years later. I was shaking, and I felt this cold sweat beat up on me, and I can only imagine how my family felt. I screamed for someone to come back and started shouting the petroglyph room over and over and over again, and finally saw light coming back down the tunnel. It had been just a little to the left of where I'd been shining my lantern trying to find it. The guide later told us that they had made it all the way back to the entrance of the cave before the piece of crap in front of me told him that he didn't know what happened to us. We were 6 people in a group of 15, and he didn't notice that we'd been left behind. To the guide's credit, most of the passage was very narrow, so he wouldn't have been able to see to the back of the group, hence the code word, but we were commended for following directions, and I saw on a map later that the path I'd been looking at, to the right of the real path, would have taken us to a vertical drop. We got a full refund for the tour, but I don't think I've ever felt more claustrophobic and primal fear than in those few minutes of complete, isolated darkness deep underground. All right, so the previous story, OP threw their shoe at the person who was going 60. I feel like OP in this story should have thrown their lantern at the person who ditched them. The whole family. I don't care if they have kids. They can watch. We're not going to hit them. We're just going to teach mom and dad a lesson. But anyway, guys, we are at the end of the video. If you've got any stories, relevant ones, feel free to share them. I don't have too many almost died ones. I shared mine earlier on the highway. But guys, thank you all so much for watching, commenting. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.